Hey guys, Hashi here, and today we're going to be reacting to a DSP video because he reacted to Warhammer stuff. So I figured, as one of the most knowledgeable people on Warhammer, I ought to react to it. And since he steals content from people, I'm just going to steal content from him, whatever. So yeah, let's get this started. Big ups to Raw DSP for the video, since DSP hasn't uploaded it yet because he's lazy.
Warhammer Fantasy is back, or more accurately, it never left. In this video, I'm dusting off some old minis to build a massive vampire.
Oh, we were just talking about
bringing
this.
it up to standard.
We were just talking about the tabletop gaming having the physical stuff, and I said I know Warhammer has all the physical stuff that you have as your pieces, your pawns in the game, but D&D really doesn't. You have to make your own, right? So here's some Warhammer stuff. Let's just watch a little of it.
Here we have DSP's first error, which is saying that D&D doesn't have the physical stuff. Now, D&D does have miniatures. In fact, if we look at the market share for miniatures in general, D&D has a significant market share for its miniatures. It's more that due to D&D's format, they're not very popular in the sense of you need these to play. Meanwhile, with Warhammer, you do just need minis to play of some kind, be it the actual minis, third party, or playing on tabletop sim or something like that. I think this just goes to show that DSP doesn't understand how people even play D&D. Aside of him bashing Baldur's Gate or something like that.
I've been challenged to a giant 3,000 point Warhammer battle at Adepticon.
Oh, 3,000 point Warhammer battle, damn.
I find this next part a little bit interesting because DSP is assuming that points are like the objective of the game rather than them being like population in a real-time strategy game. On screen I have the rule from the old world talking about how you can play at 3,000, although it kind of implies that 2,000 should probably be what you're playing at. 3,000 is probably a little bit bigger, but not quite as big to warrant its own game, like how in 40k you have Apocalypse at a certain point limit. And I forgot what they had in Fantasy, but I'm pretty sure that's something similar in Fantasy, way back in the day. I didn't play much Fantasy, I'm sorry.
From the Miscast channel. Trent is a YouTube legend, and I deeply respect and admire him as a creator. We've collaborated a few times over the years, and though I haven't met him in person, he's become a good friend. He's making the journey to Adepticon all the way from Australia, which is really cool. I'm stoked to see him. But none of that changes the fact that I want to win. And that won't be easy. Let me explain to you why. Trent is bringing demons.
Because Trent is a cheater.
Alright, so right here we have a really funny instance of DSP, and that is that he is insinuating that Trent would be cheating, the other player, when traditionally the cheater in Warhammer is typically considered the person who's being overtly competitive and trying to win, or counterlisting, which is what we kind of see here. And as you'll see in the screenshot on screen, traditionally being competitive has been considered kind of taboo, and only in recent times has that really been fixed, with the competitive scene blossoming in recent years, with the game becoming more and more popular.
Now, to understand the problem, you need to understand a few things about Warhammer Fantasy. It's essentially a sword and sorcery game where...
So this is Warhammer Fantasy. This is not the classic, or no, the now tried and true Warhammer 40k, which is supposed to be the future. This is supposed to be like the original Warhammer, is what he's saying?
Yeah, Phil, so he's saying they're playing Warhammer Fantasy. And so in Fantasy, the lore is that it connects to the same warp as 40k. And way back in the day, 40k was in the future, or was supposed to be, and 40k was, quote, bringing the lore to the galaxy itself, which I put on screen. But in more modern times, it's become more and more consistent that Fantasy, 40k, Blood Bowl, Age of Sigmar, they're all just connected to the same warp and are their own universes in this multiversal cosmology. So yeah.
Magicians and monsters duke it out. It's often called a rank and flank game, meaning several blocks of troops in several ranks form up to try to outmaneuver and defeat each other. A hugely important mechanic in the game is what they call combat resolution. When two units clash, it isn't just who can kill more of the enemy. The goal is to win the combat, and kills are just one part of the calculation of who won. Ranks are another big part. Each rank of 4 or more guys gives a +1 bonus to combat resolution. Whether or not you have a flag, if you outnumber the enemy, if you're attacking from the flank or rear, and some other things.
Wow.
So whoever scores high...
So it's very complicated, basically. It's like a tallying of points. It's not just, straight up killing.
Yeah, Phil, I think the video illustrated it properly, but yeah, there are loads of things that go into combat. You have stuff like, can your ranks actually hit each other? What about morale? How good are your saves? Are your saves impacted by something like an instrument or a banner? And all this plays into a very complex game of, do I want to fight this guy or not? Is it actually beneficial for me to go in on the charge, wait to be charged, counter charge, etc.? Not to mention initiative, like who's actually going to be hitting first. Um, yeah. So
Um, you know what I was wondering in my head here? I wonder what truly came first. Like, we know that D&D has elements that were based on Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, correct? When did Warhammer start? And when I say I mean Warhammer Fantasy.
So, D&D came first. It came out at around the late 70s for its first edition, and Games Workshop would be their distributor in the UK, and they had this magazine called White Dwarf, which would publish creature features and all sorts of stuff for D&D within the magazine. For example, that's where the Gif Yankee come from. If you've played Baldur's Gate, you knew about them. But in the late 80s, Games Workshop decided to make their own game so you could use the miniatures they were already making and double dip on that GW money. I'll put on screen the quote from Art and Arcana, The Visual History of Dungeons and Dragons. A very nice book, if you ever want to read it.
Because, like, for example, Warcraft, to me, looks like Warhammer. Does it not? Warcraft looks like Warhammer, but Warcraft was later. That was Activision, well, just Blizzard, right? And I'm wondering, did they like bite off of Warhammer Fantasy? Like, did they kind of steal the idea? Maybe they did, right? Maybe they did actually.
So here DSP speculates on if Warcraft took from Warhammer, and that's been a common misconception within the community, even of Warhammer itself, not just of Warcraft. But there's like this myth that Blizzard wanted to make a Warhammer game, and Games Workshop wouldn't play ball. I've never seen anything actually like substantiating that though. But it's not a unreasonable thing to guess based on their aesthetics. You know, big pauldrons and underbite orcs and all this stuff like that.
So SD Charger says Warhammer Fantasy started in 1983. So if that's the case, then Warhammer Fantasy very much predated anything Warcraft. And Warcraft definitely sounds, even in name, it sounds like Warcraft copy, right?
This right here is a big reason why I'm making this video, and it's because it's clear what DSP is doing is actively acting ignorant and like asking a bunch of questions. So it's dense, will super chat him money with what you'd get from a basic Google search. It's just downright pathetic, honestly, and it's really obnoxious. This is also why you should never give him money ever. You should never type in his chat ever. Just let him suffer. I mean, if he wants to continue being a clown on camera, he can be a clown, right?
In combat resolution wins the combat. And this is a big deal because if you lose the combat, you have to take a leadership test, and if you fail, you run away. And there's a chance the whole unit will be instantly destroyed if you're pursued and caught. But undead units, like my entire Vampire Count's army, are a bit different. Undead units never run away. Instead, if they lose the combat, the unit starts to crumble and disappear. They also have a special rule called Fear, which symbolizes how unnerving seeing an army of the undead would be. If a unit causes fear and outnumbers their army and wins the combat, the opponent automatically runs away, which is awesome, and one of the strongest ways to win battles with this army. You simply take a big unit of something like skeletons or zombies, which are your numbers, and then you put a big strong vampire at the front to get a bunch of kills, and then you watch your opponent automatically flee. This tactic is so effective, it's even called out in the back of the Army's book in the helpful strategy section. So why is this important? Well, demons are immune to fear. They just don't care. I guess if you come from hell, a skeleton just isn't that scary to you. Fair enough. So, if I can't scare the demons, what can I do to them?
Is that true? I'm being told, listen to this, Blizzard was going to make a Warhammer game, but and basically they didn't. It didn't go through. The deal didn't go through. So they ripped it off and made Warcraft. Wow. This is interesting. I know nothing about this, and just listening to how it works is kind of fascinating.
This is what I was talking about earlier. Not only does he admittedly not know anything, he also pretends to be ignorant in the sense that you'll ask these questions so that people will answer them, like that Dent did in chat again. And then he gets this free engagement instead of just goat laughing every 5 minutes, like you just saw in the clip. Anyways, the Dent basically said the same myth I was talking about, but it's really not a shocker that Phil knows nothing about this. He doesn't leave his house. He refuses to play anything remotely tabletop. Look how hard you had to fight to get him to play like Baldur's Gate 3, for instance. Whether or not that was an op or his fans actually wanted it, that's debatable. But he clearly didn't want to play it. He doesn't like anything that isn't a walking sim. I'm preaching to the choir at this point, let's be real here.
Well, I'm glad you asked. Walk with me. Demons have no conventional armor, but what they do have is a demonic aura, a mysterious force field that protects them against all harm. Much in the same way NordVPN...
Oh no, a paid promotion about NordVPN, that's not good.
Here we have DSP getting mad at a NordVPN sponsorship, which is rich considering something like 40% of his daily podcast is begging. Yeah, Phil, we get it. You just want to beg people for money so you can obfuscate it and then beg more. Just stop, dude. I mean, everybody knows you do it. Just take a sponsorship or something, man, and make your content way better. Even though you don't care about that, you just want to waste time and beg and manipulate people.
Wights are the elite warriors of an undead army, heavily armored heroes from ages past, resurrected in unholy thrall to serve their master's ambitions. First, we have the Grave Guard, an elite infantry unit.
Well, this is getting very technical at this point. I think that we've enjoyed it enough. I like this. I would be into this, but, you know, I'm not really going to learn it and do it. But I actually think that it's neat. I like the rule sets and everything. I'm actually being told that the original fantasy universe was apparently ended. The gods were destroyed or something, and things were reincarnated into the 40k universe.
Yeah, so, I don't think DSP would ever actually learn anything about this. I think him saying he's interested is because he gets to ask these very open-ended questions about one of the most expansive mythologies we have in fiction at the moment. With so many books and novels and whatever, Warhammer's this very vast verse, and I think DSP could fumble around with it for streams on end and milk money out of his dents. Anyways, he goes on to ask and say, I heard that Warhammer Fantasy got ended. Yeah, it did. In about 2015, there's this event called the End Times, where Archaon led his armies down and took over, and then the world blew up. I'm simplifying it. But from after that, from the ashes of the world came realms of crystallized magic, and that's what we know as the Cosmos Arcane and Age of Sigmar. And not 40k, although they're still all connected, as I said earlier in the video. But, no, the gods did not get quote-unquote reincarnated in 40k. Age of Sigmar probably takes place after 40k, like cosmologically speaking, at least.
Look at this. The next video is actually more of this.
I'm Nicholas, and I'm here with local favorite Finley Craig and his amazing Imperial Guard army.
Jesus. So wait. I will ask this question too. What's the big deal about having one of these collections? Because couldn't anyone technically just do this if they had a lot of money? Like, I don't understand. Like, oh, look at his big collection. Okay, big deal, but you could buy it too, right? So it kind of like, okay, let me put it this way. If you have a comic book collection of rare comic books, well, it's because they're rare. They're old. You can't get them anymore. They're not printed anymore. Isn't it true that you could just buy these now? Or are they all limited edition and then you can't get them anymore later? And if that's the case...
So the point of having a big collection is that, for one, it shows that you have a bunch of these things you've just poured your heart and soul into, and that you've painted up and you've worked really hard on. You get to display it all together as this cohesive unit. You know, maybe it's your chapter of Space Marines, or your regiment of Imperial Guard, or your chamber of Stormcast, what have you. The second point is that you can play more diverse armies now, because if you have a bunch of tanks, you can play Tank Imperial Guard, instead of just being forced to play, like, combined infantry, or basically just you have to use everything you have, or something like that. I think the real confusion here is that Phil was used to something like comic books, where a lot of people thought back in the day that you just sold them off. They were an investment. And that's why the bubble burst. And that's why I think it's going to happen with Magic too, as well, or in Pokemon, and a lot of these rarity racket card games. But unfortunately for Phil, it's not like that. It really isn't. I mean, some people do sell off their armies, but that's more opportunistic than it is like that was the goal the whole time. And I think a good example of why this is kind of dumb is that Phil plays WWE Champions, a game where you aren't allowed to sell your account, and he's been investing in thousands and thousands of dollars into JPEGs that he can't do anything with.
Because it's supposed to be a competitive game. How is that fair that someone bought an older unit that you can't buy anymore and now they can't use that in combat, right? I don't know. Like, I don't really understand it. I don't understand the idea of look at my collection when it's like, yeah, but anyone could just buy that. So it's not really that big of a deal. There's no scarcity to it. So why does it matter, right?
So, what I was gonna respond here mainly is where he's talking about, well, if it's not rare, couldn't anybody buy it and whatever? And yeah, for most models, just about anybody can buy them, go paint them up, whatever. Though there's some cases where, like, it's locked in a box set or whatever, but even then you can convert it. Now, old models that aren't in print usually do not have rules in the current game. For example, a big controversy was the Chaplain Dreadnought, which was used in Iron Hands, and because it was a Chaplain and a Dreadnought, and there was a litany it could use, it was almost unkillable. And so Games Workshop introduced a legacy format for the game, where you can use all these old models, like really old stuff that hasn't been in print for like 10 to 20 years, and you can use them in the modern game. But they are not legal for competitive play. And what you'll see a lot of casuals try to say is, oh, well, I could just table the competitive players. It's like, no, you couldn't. Competitive play is surprisingly deep for what you'd expect for a game where each codex has like 30 units, maybe. It's a lot of positioning and stuff like that, but yeah, it's not about having the rare unit, it's about knowing how the units work and minimizing luck. I know that sounds weird for a dice game, but that's what it's about. Magikarp Used Fly talked about this in a really good way in his video, where he was explaining how to get into Warhammer to people. You should not try to rely on luck. You should minimize it as much as possible. You should be hitting as much, wounding as much, and saving your own guys as much as you can without having to be like, oh, if I roll a 6. No, you should be like hitting on 3s or 2s and wounding on 3s or 2s.
Limited runs? Well, then again, if it's limited runs, then how is it fair if someone who jumped onto Warhammer before you bought all this cool limited run stuff, and now you can't buy it because it's limited run? So now you have worse units because you didn't buy it earlier? That's what I don't really understand. If it's competitive in nature, how is it based on money? That's what I don't get. You know what I mean? Like, then it's really not truly competitive. It's kind of like who threw their money around earlier and has the broken stuff, right? But maybe I'm wrong. I don't understand it. So, all right, we're not going to watch that video. Obviously, we just watched.
I left this last part in because I think Phil's kind of projecting here about you got on early, you have OP stuff, because I think that happened to him in one of his mobile games that he played. This is just like a hunch, obviously, but I think that he got in a little bit later, and there's like an OP unit that you can't get anymore, sunk cost, you know, the 9 yards, and Phil is really butt mad about that. And that probably ties into why he basically plays Champions exclusively, as far as we know, is that he, getting into a game like that is always really intimidating for a whale like Phil, who spends thousands upon thousands of dollars on JPEGs, is that he won't have the first anniversary limited edition whatever. No, instead he has to work with what everybody else has. He isn't that early adopter, he isn't that whale, he doesn't get to pretend to be the old guard or whatever, like. And again, this last part is especially a hunch. I feel like if you went through those WWE champions and those forum posts that he made, you would find him kind of gloating that he had this first thing, and like, you know, this first edition whatever thing. And if I had to take a guess, if I went through the field trip episode that WPIG did, you probably found something like that, and I'll have to ask people or go watch it myself and see if I'm correct on this. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If this does well, I guess I'll do more or something like that. Maybe more of Warhammer-centric content, maybe more talking about Phil. I don't know. See you guys next time.